Good evening. You're listening live to the Too Extreme Horror Show. I'm your host, Rob. My guests with me this evening are RDV, the real Dr. Venkman, as well as Professor Pixel. I'm, of course, broadcasting to you live deep from the underground bunker in the Pinehurst Palace, just west of Orlando, Florida. And while it may be raining outside, I have tacos inside. And guys, I'm sitting down with some tecate and some other Mexican names that we'll discuss here in a moment, because tonight's film is 1996's George Clooney, quote unquote, with a question mark, masterpiece, From Dusk Till Dawn. And we've got a lot to talk about this vampire movie. So let's just go around the room for our initial impressions on this movie. Now, Pixel, I'd like to start with you because from my understanding, From Dusk Till Dawn, this 1996 film, is the first time you've seen it. You watched it yesterday. What are your initial impressions, sir?
Well, for the first half, I was kind of surprised because I had always known that there was a bit in it that had to do with vampires, and they don't come until way deep in the film. And honestly, up until that point, it just felt so slow. I was like, is this ever going to pick up? But finally, once they get to the bar, which is named the Titty Twister, everything starts. It goes from 0 to 60 all at once. And that's when the fun really begins.
I think there's a lot of merit to that, too. And it'll be interesting to talk about how things 25 years ago might be the same or might be a little bit different in today's woke world, because that's one thing that surprised me about this film, was that there was some language in here that I went, I wonder if people will put when this drops on HBO Max or wherever it appears next, probably Netflix, if they'll put a little woke disclaimer at the front about insensitivity and all that nonsense that's going on. So let's go to you, RDV. Give it to me.
I've watched this movie a while back, and then I watched the series. I'm watching the movie again, and so when I'm watching this, I'm looking for similarities between the Stevie series and the movie. But like I said, I had to rewatch the first part of the movie because I know there's a gas station scene, the little thing, convenience thing. What do you call it? Convenience store.
Yes.
And I couldn't exactly remember that. Is that because I'm so used to my mind's fresh with the TV version, so I had to rewatch. I'm like, yeah, that's what I thought happened. So, I love, like I said, they're using the Ford Mercury, Ford Mercury Cougar, which is basically the off-put version of the cheaper version of the Mustang at that time. And
it's also, a great opening gambit. So if you don't remember it and you just remember some other scenes after that, sure, absolutely, because you're right, it is kind of slow until that.
Because at first you're sitting, you watch the opening scene, you see this car pulls up. It's the Ranger. He's in there and he's talking to the guy. They're shooting, they're shooting the crap and all. And at that point, you forget, if you've never watched the movie, you don't even know that Seth and Richie are in there holding two girls hostage until after the guy goes to take a tinkle.
Yep.
And surprise, if you didn't know this was going to happen, this is Richie's played by Quentin Tarantino, even though this is a Robert Rodriguez film. So yeah. So basically, yeah, this was actually I still say it's one of my favorite openings to a movie. Especially when the guy like Richie just goes there, blows the Ranger's head off, and then the guy is freaking out. They're just gonna gunfight. He's like, Richie, can you shoot the bottles above him? He's like, sure. All the liquor bottles, and he's taking a toilet paper and he's lighting it with the lighter fluid. You knew it was gonna happen.
Yeah. Okay, I forgot about that. Yes.
And I love how, like, even though like that's, you get to later in the movie, like you're almost like 20 or 30 40 minutes in, and then you that scene's like, kind of like, hey, we're at the hotel scene. He's looking through his hand. So the hole is in because he gets shot in the freaking hand. I'm thinking, duct tape's not going to help you, bro. You're going to die from infection if you don't get that cleaned out.
Well, it's interesting because up to this point in the mid-90s, Quentin Tarantino obviously had been making a name for himself. To see him acting, I think, is a nice change of pace. And the fact that he's playing a quiet role, if you will, I think is very interesting, even though he's psychotic. I think he actually does a great job in it. And I think he's I really enjoyed his performance in there, believe it or not. At some point, I expect him to Tarantino all over himself, but he really doesn't. And of course, with what happens later, that's interesting too. But Robert Rodriguez, to kind of start off talking to him about him, even though Quentin Tarantino wrote this, I like the way the film looks, and I agree it's a nice opening gambit to it. Which, I have a little nitpicky thing, like where I say there's no such thing as horror comedy. I recently saw a released Netflix, I believe it's a Netflix original, called We Summon the Darkness, and it's got a good 80s feel to it, but it's not good because it's trying to be comedy, it's trying to be serious, it doesn't do a good job at it. Most movies that are like that won't step up to plate, say, no, we're going to be comedy and have horror elements like we talked about before on the Two Extreme Horror Show with some movies. So for this movie, I don't call this a horror film, believe it or not. I call it an action film. And it is slow, it is deliberate. It's almost 2 hours long. So, the first third of the movie, they're not even at the titty twister yet. So by the time they get there, you still got about half the film to go before things start picking up pace-wise. And I think that's actually very smart because it is slow, it is deliberate, and it forces you to kind of pay attention a little bit to Seth and Richie, the brothers. And the thing about it that kind of loses its luster, I think, with this show or this movie is that it's kind of like a dark film in a way because, was it Richie? He's a rapist. He's a disgusting bastard. Quentin Tarantino, there's some horrible scenes in here. But for me, the real character thing is trying to focus on George Clooney, because to me, this is his breakout role. He'd been around for a little bit. He obviously blew up after this film. I don't think he works as a tough guy. I think he does actually a great job coming across as a somewhat smart person, kind of like putting all the pieces together, like when he's trying to negotiate what's going on between his brother and the people that he picks up along the way between all these different entities as like a quote unquote peacemaker, to make fun of a movie of his. He does really good juggling that role, but the tough guy stuff with the gun, I'm just not buying, but he's got a good look. They have some chemistry together on screen. It's not too often we get brothers or like a buddy type film when it comes to these types of things. So I think ultimately, with the Mexican background, very fun film. Must see if you haven't seen it. It's obviously led to the TV show, which we'll probably be talking about here real soon, but very, very good. What did you guys think of the roles of these two guys as far as their performances? Did you like them? Did you hate them? What stood out to you?
Like I said, I watched the show within the past 2 or 3 years ago. So I mean, DJ Cortana, who took over the role of Seth. So I'm trying not to compare them, but like, I still like what's his name, George Clooney. I think this is better than anything he's done. I think this is one of his best roles. I hated him in ER, and I hate him as a Batman, which he did horrible. This was actually believable. I mean, now the tattoo I thought was kind of cool because if you know the extra about that, how they get that painted on and it goes all the way down. It's not just the neck part; it goes all the way down. But I'm not sure about. I think that's only in the TV series, but in the movie, it's only down to like his collarbone.
No,
yeah, it is a good look for him. I do agree.
Like I said,
down his arm.
Does it go down? Does it go? Okay, I can remember.
At the end of the movie, he like takes off his shirt and he's wearing.
Oh yeah. Okay.
It goes down his arm.
But I can say I liked him in this role. Now him being anything else in this, like because it works for him because he's the pretty boy, and that's what his character is in this movie. Seth has always been the pretty boy, but he's the serious one. He's not a freaking killer, so people trust him. So I like that. I believe that even though he's a man of his word in this movie, I will not kill you. But my own problem with Seth is he's too trusting of his brother. If he wouldn't have left her alone with his brother, that the hostage, the bank teller lady, she would have been alive.
Yeah, and he's the thing with Seth that you nailed it there too is that he's a bit too trusting, and so I don't think he's stupid, but he definitely has a way for juggling relationships, and I think that to see him having to deal with that was the strongest part about Clooney's performance.
But I also think the other problem is that he knew he's torn. He has to go meet that guy, but he also can't bring his brother along because his brother would probably fuck it up.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So that's my reasoning why he left her alone with him.
The main thing I'm wondering is because it's written by Quentin Tarantino. Did he intentionally make himself so disgusting because that's how he really is?
It might have been for shock value, because he does like the gore movies. And look at the Django Unchained. He likes being offensive.
Well, I think the whole 70s kind of blaxploitation type thing that he's known for really comes through in his film. And I think that when you talk about Robert Rodriguez, he has a little bit of that in him too. So I think the combination of them, it comes through pretty good, because to me, it's all a misdirection. And that's the whole point of making this movie. Okay, it's about vampires and it's a Mexican setting and everything else there too. But, again, being a little bit longer than average, it really slowing down everything, throwing the religious angle in there too with, Jacob in there and his kids that we'll talk about here in a moment. It really works. And then, of course, once they, get over across the thing in Mexico, it really turns into a different film to me. And so I would say that while I enjoy the whole film as a whole, I actually kind of like the first movie that I think that I saw too, the slow burn. You've got Stevie Ray Vaughan music playing in the background before the vampires, turn and it goes apeshit crazy. But basically, the brothers, they kidnap Jacob and his kids, and like to your point, they kind of seem trusting in that, hey, we're just going to get you across the border. Everything goes great. I'm going to let you guys go. We just have to get to El Rey. And one thing I do like and appreciate about the show is the very ending scene when they're driving away, or when he's driving away and the camera pans away and you see the painting and you see that the titty twisters built on top of like a temple, like an ancient Mayan temple. You get some of these non sequiturs, some of these things that hint at a history that's there. And even if it's not totally fleshed out, I like it, because that leads, of course, into the TV show. But in here, it's pretty simple. Hey, we did a bunch of bad shit. We're just trying to get here or catch them in the middle of stuff, so we don't have to get a lot of their backstory. But we get most of the backstory when it comes to Jacob, the guy that his wife had died in a car accident, which is a bit wordy, and his two kids. The kid, how do I say it? His son.
Adopted son, yes. Scott.
His adopted son he's okay in here, but he's almost like invisible. Juliette Lewis, though, as the daughter, I think is fantastic in here as well.
I
provides the sexual tension in there that's needed for what happens.
I always forget it's her because she's so young looking in this.
Yeah. And of course, we get some shots of Kelly Preston as a newscaster. Not too many of them.
Rest in peace, Kelly.
Yeah. But also, let's not forget, John Sachs is the FBI guy. I popped when I saw that because I forgot he was in it. I'm like, damn it, just having him in here for like a minute interview saying, we're coming after you with the Rangers and everybody is pretty good too. But yeah, they kidnap the family. They get through a pretty decent tense scene at the border. And so you're like, wow, it's like magical. They cross the border and all they got to do is just go down the road, take a left, get to the titty twister. And so we're still like not even halfway through the film yet. But to your point, this film seems like it's been going on pretty low. But then they get to the titty sister. The titty sister. I'm sure one of the dancers is named that. Jeez. But when they get to the titty twister, I'm like, okay, this is kind of cool. This is fun. And it turns into a different film entirely. And I'm a little... I don't know if let down's the right word for it, because I still enjoyed it, but it definitely felt different. What did you guys think?
I thought it was great. I still like this movie all the way through.
This is definitely a guy's movie.
Why do you say that, Pixel?
I don't think I have to go into it if anybody's seen it. It's definitely a guy's kind of film.
It's definitely an anti-marriage film, that's for sure.
Oh.
Pretend we haven't seen it. Explain in great detail.
No, I don't think I will.
Well, you meet Fred the Hammer Williamson. You meet Sex Machine, who's Tom Savini, who I think did the makeup in here too. So just from knowing these guys, if were fans of them, or even if you don't know them, you know that because they're being shown, they're going to come up. So basically, teams are being formed here because there's what happens is they make their way in there. They're just going to have something to drink, something to eat until they meet their contact there when the bar closes at dawn. And it's out in the middle of literally nowhere. And there's all these beautiful women dancing around. It's a shitty looking dive bar. And let's be honest, guys, this is a fantastic set piece. It looks awesome. It's great. It makes me want to go there. It looks like the best, adult entertainment Disney could ever provide.
The
So
kid on the sun. I'm sorry. The face
go ahead.
on the sun's face is just. Yep. I expected to. I expected that whenever he's looking around.
Yeah, we get in. We get to the middle of the movie here, and they're sitting down having drinks, and it's
Yep.
slowing down, and we're getting a shift of what's going to happen. Hey, we're going to meet the guy. You guys will be free. Everything's cool. So we know we got half a movie left. And to your point that you mentioned earlier, Pixel, it had something to do with vampires, but we're not quite sure what happens. And then the shit literally hits the fan. It just goes absolutely nuts because, they were treated kind of not like they're locals, more like tourists. They get in there. The priest and him are kind of going at it. Harvey Keitel does a good job in here of being kind of stern and being kind of a dick, actually, which is pretty cool. And you see where I like the bitter nature of this film in the sense that a lot of people aren't going to make it out alive. And even though it's kind of fun for the next big sequence here, you just don't know exactly how it's all going to play out. Is everybody going to survive? Is everybody going to live? And you get this wonderful dancing scene that, of course, was Salma Hayek that everybody remembers from the film. And then you get this big, massive shootout when the vampires turn because Richie's got his hand shot through with the duct tape on it. But then the guys they beat up when they walked in the bar, hey, that's the asshole that kicked me when I was down, and they stab his hand again and blood's gushing everywhere. And Salma Hayek's just standing there in the background, and it's a great shot, and you could just see her breathing a little heavy, staring at that blood. And it's a great scene because it slows down so much where almost there's no movement with the camera, no movement with anybody in the background. And then boom, they turn the vampires and it's a shit show for a good couple minutes. Let's talk about the scene, guys. What did you think?
I was to say it's a bloodbath. Holy crap. I mean, I'm Santanical Pandemonium. Salma Hayek, she's dancing, all of a sudden she just goes fully on snake, bites Richie. Mm-hmm. And then Seth basically shoots the chandelier and impales her.
Yeah, she's going through a big speech about, since you'll be my slave, you'll lick the dog shit from my boot. And she says something like that, like, welcome to slavery. And he's like, no, thanks, I already had a wife. Shoots the chandelier. I mean, Clooney's good at those kind of deliveries where it's a little bit bitter, a little bit, I don't know. But it's just, the thing that sets this all up is the scene of Santanico dancing, because it really hypnotizes you. It's very seductive. Well, it's not trashy or trampy. Well, it's very hot. It's very sexy. It's beautiful.
Yeah, she's dancing, and she goes up to Richie, and she just starts pouring the alcohol down on her leg, and it goes down her foot and into his mouth.
He sucks the toes. And,
I know. I was like, well, it's Richie. He already set up to be a freak as it is. So,
like I said, I think Quentin Tarantino did that deliberately.
I've seen worse in other adult places, and honestly, over the years. That's one of the things, too, is that wild and crazy things would always go on in clubs and stuff, too. And now in today's world, it's like, yeah, there's still strip clubs. There's still this and that going on. But, it was only a couple years after that when you had From Eyes Wide Shut, when everyone's like, oh, my God, there's upscale sex clubs where people do that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, they've always been around. But this is just a down and dirty biker bar. But the women are shot beautifully. They're not completely nude. It's done very tastefully, but again, very seductive, very erotic is the word I want to use. It's pure softcore porn in a way, without being too trampy. I mean, there's no actual sex going on, but you do get hypnotized watching Salma Hayek doing her dancing. But we all know how incredibly beautiful she is as a woman. Naturally, impossible genetics to pass on. It's just phenomenal. It's one of the most iconic scenes, I think, in one of her films.
And we know there's no sex going on, but there's a sex machine.
Yeah, who's got the cock and balls metal device down there too, and a whip and everything. It's really stupid.
I'm like, why is he
gotta love sex machine? That entire scene, whenever he's with Kate and he says, "What's your name?" She says, "Kate." Then she asks, "What's yours?" And he says, "Sex machine. Nice to meet you." I go shaking his head.
Yeah. Well, what's cool here is after the fight, they acknowledge, hey, what happens is there's a bunch of vampires here. What the hell are we going to do now? They're so into the moment. It's great. There's no slow moments of expository, philosophical enlightenment or any other sort of bullshit nonsense. It's, hell no, we're in a predicament. Who cares what our backgrounds are? How are we going to deal with this? And we got to act quickly. And that's exactly what happens. It's pretty cool.
It's crazy how everybody gets bit like one after another. First, Frost, then then Sex Machine gets thrown in there, and the vampires bite him. Frost turns into becomes a vampire. And then whenever he's running to the storeroom, and you're like, holy crap! Look at all the weapons. It's like basically everything that all the past victims have left behind. It's like a holy grail of just a cache of weapons, including a stick on a pneumatic drill.
Yeah, this is where it's a little silly. I mean, it makes sense. It's like, okay, this is the A-team scene. This is where everybody equips up. And they talk about stuff. Sex Machine, of course, gets bit, and so he's trying to like hide it. But of course, he's going to turn. And then, of course, Scott ends up getting whacked too, and he gets his throat. Like, okay, well, that's pretty juicy. I mean, he does a good job going down. But at this point in the movie, it's all about Jacob having to bless everything, and okay, what's going to happen and all that. And then, of course, he has to put Richie down because Richie got it. And it's kind of neat to see George Clooney kind of play a little tormented here because he's really a bad guy. We're not supposed to be rooting for him. But like I say, I think he stands out really well when he's trying to just be a diplomat as opposed to a bad guy. And I think that was a good comment, RDB, about him not really seeming like he's that way. And he says it there. He basically says, hey, look, I'm a thief, Richie. This is not how we do it. I don't kill people, unless I have to. This is what we do, and it's a nice, it's just enough of a backstory for you to go, okay, Clooney does do a good job with this performance here too.
And I'm glad that we got to see, what's his name here, Danny Trejo was in this as well.
Yeah, he's the bartender. You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
and he would show up a lot from here on out, from this point on. Absolutely.
He's Razor Charlie.
Yeah. All right. Well, go ahead.
And also you get to see Fred Williamson in here too as well. So you're seeing this is 1996. You're still seeing people from the 80s and the late 70s popping up in these movies.
We should also talk about Cheech Marin.
Well, yeah, we'll get to him.
Take the lead. He's been around forever, guys, since the 70s as a comic, as a stand-up in a bunch of movies. He got a new lease on life basically in the 90s, starring in that Don Johnson TV show, and then of course here. So go ahead.
Cheech Marin does more of the heavy lifting than anyone else in the movie because he has to play 3 roles. He plays 3 roles. And they just threw him around like he was a different person every day. In fact, the guy that really starts it all off, that triggers the vampires, is Cheech Marin. Whenever he busts in and he gets beat up, he sparks everything. Without Cheech Marin, there is no From Dusk Till Dawn. He is the piece of the movie that we needed.
Yeah, he's a border agent when they're crossing over. That actually climbs the board, looks around. He's the hype man at the beginning of the titty twister that turns into a vampire, like you said, that gets his butt there. And then he's the actual contact, the Carlos, whoever it is that they're meeting.
Yeah, he was posing as Chet, the bodyguard. And I love he's like, and he set this gold rails on him. He's like, why the hell did you choose this place? Like, I don't know. I just chose a place. It was vampires.
Yeah, so at this point, they all, like I say, have the A-team scene. They all get all their weapons and all that too. So we get to see Frost, who's Fred Williamson, and we get to see Sex Machine do some stuff. Everybody gets their moment to shine, which is kind of how these action scenes go. One thing I do want to make a comment on to kind of segue into our final thoughts here is that I forgot about this movie that they kind of followed the same vampire rules that we've come to know about crosses and holy water, but also, stakes to the heart and beheading. But most importantly, the one that seems pretty universal is, at least in movies, is the ultraviolet radiation, the sunlight, because of course that's a big factor in here. And I go, well, wait a minute, this movie was 96.
Yeah.
Blade was 98, and they go up crazy near. Vampires from John Carpenter, I think, was 98 or 99 as well in that time frame. A bunch of them were exploding. So it just was a 90s thing. Don't know why. I'm just mentioning it though.
I don't know, but like I said, I still like that one with John Bon Jovi.
It's not bad. It's tolerable, but that's for another stream, definitely. And of course, I'm talking about the first one. You're talking the second, I believe.
Yeah, no,
Before he discovered country music.
right.
But no, this movie's got a great little ending here, and I know a lot of times when people saw this movie, they're like, "Oh, it's cool, it's stylistic, it's Tarantino-esque, it's blah blah blah," and all this hip stuff that people were trying to latch onto in the '90s. To me, yeah, it's like a Tarantino film, but it's a Robert Rodriguez film, so it's got both their fingerprints on them. Some people were upset because I think they did think that there should have been a little bit more to the film, which is not alluded to. And eventually with the TV show, they definitely filled out a lot and I think did a good job of it. We'll talk about that later. But here towards the end, like I say, they just realized they're in a predicament. How are they going to get down to it? Well, let's get our weapons. Let's go out here. We need to go out there for one big fight. And that's going to be it. So it gets out there and it's actually kind of nasty and more drawn out than the original bar fight, which was a little bit more, I think, over the top. So here you've got tons of vampires. You got ones that had gotten shot coming back and all that, but it actually doesn't look good for them at the end until they realize that, when they're shooting through and the light's coming through, that it's going to make them kind of go away. But at the end, several people have died. You're only left with a couple. I mean, Jacob even gets it and it turns, and that's kind of good. So the only person you've pretty much got left standing is, of course, Seth, which is George Clooney's character, and Juliette Lewis characters, Kathy. And that's pretty much it. And they meet Carlos at the end, and he kind of bitches about him. But the one thing I wanted to bring up here, guys, is really actually two things. The fight I want you guys to talk about, but then I want to talk about why do we think they let Catherine, who looks like she's of age, so to speak, 16 to 20, let's say, why do you think in the movie Seth left her there? Because he leaves her and gives her some money and all that, and they talk. She wants to go with him. He's like, nope, and then leaves. I mean, is that like too honorable? Is that like a bad ending? Let's talk about both.
He says at the end, I'm a bastard, but I'm not a fucking bastard. Which we just got demonetized. I'm sorry. Well, we weren't monetized in the first place. But anyway, I think he was saying that you're a little too young for this kind of life, so just go on home.
Well, yeah, he didn't want to. She already had a traumatic experience. She lost her father and her stepbrother. So it's like being with him, who's still wanted for all the crimes and stuff like that. It's like, he's a criminal. You want the criminal life.
But they're home free. They've been through a very emotional bonding experience. The next thing to do would be to have sex.
I don't know, maybe really.
Yeah, that's typically how it works. You go through a big traumatic thing like that.
He's like 30-something years old, and she's 16 years old. I doubt he's that kind of a bastard.
I bet she's actually like around 18. I'm talking about movie-wise, but
I was gonna say her character-wise is 16 in the movie.
Is it 16?
I didn't know.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then yeah, no.
Okay, but she's got nowhere to go. She's got a bunch of cash that she's not going to be able to go far with, because everyone always thinks, when you get a crap ton of cash, the life-changing amount, that it's really easy to get across the border or you're not going to get stolen. She has absolutely no defenses. I could make the counter argument that he's being more of a bastard by leaving her stranded.
Maybe she's got relatives. Who knows?
No, the whole thing has to do not so much with her, but with his character. Like I was saying, is he a really bad guy? Yeah. Yeah, and he's, like to your point, RDV, he's makes maybe not some great decisions, watching over Richie and his brother, knowing that he's literally a monster, a rapist, a killer, a guy that's very unhinged. He's like the, mongoloid kid that gets talked about at the beginning with the cop and the guy at the bar in the opening sequence about, having to watch somebody. And I think that's, of course, alluding to him. And, these are just like the adult versions. So, yeah, it just looks like,
I also think that he also didn't want to become a parent. Because remember, he's a thief. He plans out things, he does things. Having her is not part of the plan. The plan already went with the shit, so he's forming new plans. And he doesn't want to have to take responsibility for her and stuff. She's a liability. So he gave her. The fact that he gave her money at all, basically didn't shoot her.
Right. No, I don't disagree with you on that. It just seemed kind of not unusual, I guess, but I don't know. I feel a little conflicted because it could have went different ways. Because to your point, there was, I think, a couple of video on demand things after this one, 2 and 3, which honestly I think I've saw them, but I don't recall them, and nobody's in them, and I don't even know if they use a lot of the same characters, so it's hard to say. But
I don't think they did at all.
Well, actually, the 2 sequels are prequels.
Okay, there you go. That explains it. Yeah, because I just thought, what an interesting situation for these people to be left at. Well, I'm actually trying to say what I liked about this movie is that, there's the hint of this place, El Rey. It's almost like Salem's Lot, the way the original TV movie ended. It makes you want to see more and what's going on, and you want to see the next step. And, that's one thing this movie does very well, is that it makes you interested in the setup there too. I think you could argue about whether or not you like certain characters, but the fact that not all of them are left alive at the end, not everybody is sacred, I think is a positive thing to it. And I think
that's
when the movie shines is when it's being a little bit dark.
As much as I love this movie, I was glad that they did the TV series, and they actually got rid of some of the loopholes. Like the one you're talking about right now, letting her leave. They changed that a little bit. Yeah, they expanded more on things. They added lore and stuff. They focused more on the titty twister as far as the vampires, and that's why I love the show, because it's basically what the movie should have been. Instead of doing prequels, they should have done sequels.
Yeah, and I know one of the TV show that starts on El Rey with Robert Rodriguez's involvement in there. We're going to be talking about season 1 of that starting next week, actually, which is why I wanted to preview this movie. And there's a lot of interesting things to compare and contrast for it. But ultimately, from my final thoughts as we go around here, definitely a very good action film. It's a little underrated. I always remembered it, even though it was a hit. I wouldn't say it was a blockbuster, but
I would say it was well loved.
Oh, it is. It's got that cult kind of like attraction, I think, to it. Yeah.
Still today, but I'm just saying, $19 million was the budget. It made over $60 million.
Yeah. And people loved of Desperado, Antonio Banderas. They loved this Robert Rodriguez thing going on in the 90s. They also, of course, like Quentin Tarantino type movies. Pulp Fiction had been out at this point. And so there was definitely some traction, certain new types of films had going on in the 90s. And for me, this, I thought, set out as a good action movie. Like I said, it's not a horror film by any means. So if you go in there thinking it's like that and it's scary, I think you'll be disappointed. If you go in there thinking, okay, it's just like a cops and robbers kind of chase film that happens to have vampires in it, I think you'll be more rewarded looking at it through that lens. Of course, that's the way I think for it. But again, I always remember the really seductive scene with Salma Hayek in it, how dark the brother was, and just the nasty stuff he did. I'm glad he died. It made me feel like, okay, that added some legitimacy to those two. And the fact that a lot of people died at the end that we were following through the whole movie, it didn't seem like it was overly dramatic or anything or done poorly, but ultimately a very good film. And I'm glad they were able to flesh out. It was good intellectual property, and it definitely had some meat that could get reworked later on. And can't wait to look forward to we start talking about season 1 next week. So for our final thoughts, what do you guys have?
Well, like I said, this is a good movie still, even standalone. Yeah, it's a little bit darker. I really love this. When Seth came in and he's standing there looking at the motel room, looking where, and he's talking to Richie, what the hell did you do? And he kept flashing. You get flashes. I thought that was really cool for editing like that.
Yeah, because it took like a minute before the conversation even turns to the hostage that they have. That's what adds a little impact to it. You're absolutely right. That's a great scene.
Yeah. So that's one of my favorite scenes from that movie. Even though it is kind of slow at first, I think where it drags is when they really throw the Harvey Keitel and his 2 kids. That's where it drags. But up until that point, it'd been great. Like I said, the movie is still one of my favorite movies to watch, especially for vampire movies. I mean,
it's a very solid.
Everybody talks about Blade, but I talk about this one too. It's like, this is a movie. It's like, man, what would you do? It's like, hey, we're gonna have 2 bank robbers in a Mercury Cougar, one's psychotic and the other one's just like, oh, just let me breaking across the border, get out of here, and then let's throw vampires in there. It's like, what? So when you first watch this, if you don't know there's vampires in this, it just throws you for a loop. It's like, what?
Exactly. That's good too. I mean, part of me wishes they would have had the movie as like an action movie and let the vampire part be a surprise. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. I think that might have made it pop a bit more too. No, that's a good point. I definitely agree with you on that.
I think it's a lot.
I'd like to add.
Well, you wonder how many. I can't remember ever seeing a movie trailer for this back in the '90s, but I'm pretty sure. Like, remember, you didn't have the internet's early. You had 94, you had or '96, you had dial-up, but no one was really looking at previews for movies unless you actually went watched movies in theaters before this came out.
Yeah,
So you had no idea there's vampires in this, really. Till the very end, and people are like, "Holy crap, this is the vampire movie." We just know it's Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez teaming up, and then it's like a action violent, and the George Clooney. It's like you're like, "Damn, George Clooney can friggin' act." it's
better than ER, yeah.
And then Tarantino, if you really hate him, this is the perfect role to watch him in.
Honestly, as soon as the her name is blanking on me right now.
Salma
Which
Hayek?
Character? Yes.
Salma Hayek.
Santanical?
As soon as her face changed into this giant snake-like thing, I was taken aback, and it made up for every slow moment before it. It was.
You're speechless.
Yeah, I'm speechless. I'm just thinking about it.
Now, Pixel, you are the young one of the group. Is this like the sexiest movie you've seen? I don't mean anything off of you, Jizz, or anything else there either. Let's keep it clean, okay? This is a G-rated movie show.
Well, yeah, I wasn't gonna bring porn into it, man.
Damn, I didn't know that. I gotta leave.
I think perhaps it might be. I've seen a lot of movies. To be fair, I have seen a lot of movies, but I think this may be just with that one dance scene alone. That was something special.
And that's why everybody was like, when you watch this movie Grown Ups, you see Salma Hayek in there. It's like, how did she end up with Adam Sandler as a husband? it's unbelievable. After you see this movie.
To quote from Animal House, 0.0. No chance on that. Absolutely. Yeah, so guys, there you have it. Great film from 1996, From Dusk Till Dawn, Quentin Tarantino, Salma Hayek, a bunch of others in there. Go see it. Go rewatch it again. If you're in the right mood for it, it's a great slow burn. It's nice to watch during the holidays, and by that, of course, I mean Halloween, which looking forward to covering some less than popular Halloween films as we get closer to it. So, look, I want to thank RDV and Professor Pix for showing up again tonight, guys. Hey, like the boys on Buffy, we are talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Start next week. We will be doing season 1 from Al Ray, from Dusk Till Dawn, and we'll be doing episodes 1 and 2 to start off with. So if you haven't checked that out, go check out the show so we can have a conversation about it. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing and getting the word out about the Two Extreme Horror Show and anything else that we cover here. I'm your host, Rob. Good night.
And be cool.